There are 3 things in history you don't know, and it's keeping you stupid. I said that wrong. Wait, actually, no, I didn't. I didn't say that wrong at all.
Handwritten love letters, combos and quality time.
Hey, cool kids, I'm Sunny Day Jones. Right now, you can also call me overwhelmed. Yeah, if you follow me anywhere else, you know that the kind of content I love the most, the stuff I love to create, is about teaching, reading, books, helping people learn new things, helping people get from one place to another in their mind and their understanding. But I cannot lie, that kind of content has been really tough to produce lately. And not just because of tense political times or whatever. I've found myself overwhelmed when it's time to hit record. Overwhelmed to the point of just wanting to curl up in a ball and cry, which I absolutely have done. And I think I finally figured out why. So like I said, because I didn't misspeak, there are 3 things in history we don't know that are keeping us stupid. Hold on. When I say stupid, I don't mean you are intellectually inferior to me. Although there are some people, when they open their mouth, I just be like, oh, I didn't know I was better than you. That's crazy. When I say stupid, I mean that you're living life and forming opinions without very important pieces of very simple context. Context is all the things surrounding a certain topic that might help you understand it better and could maybe even help you form a different opinion, a better opinion, a more informed opinion. I am not blaming you or shaming you. Information is intentionally kept from all of us. Back to my overwhelm though, there is a constant feedback loop of information that we're all getting. Information, news, opinions on the news, and regular content that's not about the news. A lot of times I don't know exactly what to talk about because I can tell there is so much context missing from the content we consume, the knowledge that we're given, and the opinions that we have. Over the last few months, the pieces of context we've been missing, I feel like have fallen into 3 very important themes. And as someone who studies history, especially very specific points in history, I'm wondering why we live in a system that hasn't told us these 3 things very clearly. Well, I'm wondering why, but I know why. Let's take a ride. Number 1, Abraham Lincoln was dead a week after the Civil War. Yeah, you need to know that so that you know the importance of slavery to this country, and so that can really start to sink in for you. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated 1 week after the Civil War. Every time I tell people that, they get wide-eyed and little sparks fly in their brain, and for good reason. We learn about Abraham Lincoln's assassination. On my elbow that she see, this is really weird. We learn about that in school. There's been documentaries, movies, musicals, books, and conspiracy theories that approach this historical event from every possible angle, and I still don't think this direct connection on the timeline of history is named often enough at all. Slavery and the racism that justified it was so important to this country that the war ended on April 9th, and President Lincoln was dead by the end of the week. Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia on April 9th, 1865. Now, he didn't surrender the whole Confederate army, but his surrender was the main one that put the nail in the coffin. It signaled the loss. It's like when they pull LeBron out in the 4th quarter, you know that the Lakers got the game on lock, or the Heat, or the Cavs. What a career. Okay, anywho, so that was April 9th, 1865. That was a Sunday. On Friday, April 14th, President Lincoln was shot in that theater and he died Saturday morning. It's not just about the facts you know for your test in school or for your internet deep dive. This week in time is so important. White people in these stolen United States wanted slavery because we were a race-based slave society. Black people were deemed slaves for life solely on the basis of being born black, which of course led to these ridiculous racist beliefs of black inferiority that still persist today. So a lot of white people sympathize with the Confederate Army because they wanted slavery to continue for various reasons. How else could you justify treating human beings as less than you? And you want to know who held this opinion real close to his heart? John Wilkes Booth. Yeah, the Lincoln assassinator himself. Because we don't put the date of Lincoln's assassination in its proper context, we skip over another date. April 11th, 1865. On that day, John Wilkes Booth was in the audience when Abraham Lincoln made a speech that supported black men, especially black veterans, having the right to vote. Do you know how racist you have to be for hundreds of years after the fact? Direct quotes are established, and it is established that John Wilkes Booth muttered to himself in that crowd, "That is the last speech he will ever make." Booth shot Lincoln 3 days later. Now, the U.S. did not just want slavery, it needed slavery. The U.S. wants you to think that there were just a few black people cooking or working on a farm without pay. They want you to think that we were a society with slaves. No. Slaveholders made up the ruling class, and the working class was made up of people who wanted to be the ruling class. Slavery determined the daily life of the country at that time. By 1860, there were 4 million enslaved people in the United States, producing astronomical levels of wealth for the country. Removal of slavery, especially from the southern states, would mean the utter collapse of their social order. To this day, the state of Louisiana cannot separate their for-profit prison system from their economy because their state would collapse. The U.S. needs people to work for free. Slavery was not just upholding hatred for black people, it was upholding the free labor that gave the United States a $1 billion head start to global economic control. The U.S. spent 400 years with the biggest overhead cost of running a business being zero, being nothing, no employee cost, no labor cost, none. Slavery was not a want for the U.S., it was a need. And now that slavery is kind of abolished, this country does not run unless people are working for as close to free as possible. I'm being very concise here for the sake of time. The vast wealth that the U.S. obtained from the transatlantic and the domestic slave trade is damn near impossible to exaggerate or even calculate. I haven't even gotten to how the Civil War was fought over slavery. The best way to even begin talking about American slavery and its impacts is to keep in mind that President Lincoln was killed 1 week after the Civil War, or the chance to keep slavery going. John Wilkes Booth originally planned to kidnap President Lincoln, but then the Civil War ended, and then his co-conspirators shifted to Plan B, which was to assassinate the president, vice president, and the Secretary of State. Their hope was to cause so much chaos that the Confederacy would have a chance to recover, and that a government based in slavery and white supremacy would have a chance to continue. Abraham Lincoln was dead a week after the Civil War, and without this piece of information, you might repeat lines like modern day slavery and not even look at the connection between slavery and the modern day at all. All right, so let's get to the second thing you need to know. Number 2, you need to know the full name of the March on Washington. You need to know that so that you don't hate people on food stamps, and so that you know that politicians and the rich are deciding what work and pay looks like for us. And that is the actual problem with affordability, the economy, and whatever else they're talking about right now. It's the March on Washington for jobs and freedom. We call the March on Washington by a shorthand name, and we rarely call it by its name anymore because something happened at that march that became more famous than the march itself. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom is where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Fun facts: no, that was not the title of the speech. No, that was not the first time he said those words publicly, and he almost did not say them at the march. Singer Mahalia Jackson urged him to say the "I Have a Dream" words on stage. Maybe we'll get to that event in another video because it's truly one of my Roman empires. My God, there is not a stadium in this country that can hold the number of people that were on the Washington Mall that day. Whew. On August 28th, 1963, 250,000 people marched on the Washington Monument to hear multiple speakers, including Dr. King, talk about economic freedom and advancements in civil rights. And we can connect this to what we were just talking about. 1963 was the 100-year anniversary of what? The Emancipation Proclamation. Yes, that cute little document Abraham Lincoln signed freeing enslaved people during the Civil War. The document that you could argue sealed his own fate. It was a bold statement in favor of ending slavery, and that put the target on his back in the first place. So it's 1963. In June of that same year, President John F. Kennedy made a nationally televised speech supporting civil rights for Black people. That speech put a target on his back as well. He would be assassinated by November of that same year. Side note, 1963 is such an important year. Like, I cannot, okay. Other videos can be made, Sonny. Let's move on. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom was not just about Martin Luther King Jr. having a dream about his black kids going to school with white kids. Many civil rights leaders were labor organizers who expanded their resume to bigger civil rights movements. They did that once the election of President John F. Kennedy made real federal advancements in civil rights a serious possibility. Jobs and freedom. These stolen United States would have you believe that civil rights activists are lazy people exaggerating political divisions to advocate for government assistance so they don't have to go to work. One more time, because that is the playbook, and I need you to understand this. These stolen United States would have you believe that civil rights activists are lazy people exaggerating political divisions to advocate for government handouts so they don't have to go to work. And a lot of people still believe that. Literally, right now, the conservative-controlled government is holding federal food stamp benefits hostage during a government shutdown. And lots of Republicans in America are happy about that. They're happy it's happening because they believe that food stamp recipients are lazy and exaggerating problems like the economic and racial divide. But to anyone who would listen to civil rights activists, it was so clear that labor organizers and civil rights activists were looking to end racial segregation and were looking for economic opportunity. In addition to civil rights for Black people, Dr. King advocated for a higher minimum wage, a guaranteed annual income, and access to services that support economic mobility. He did that in something called his Economic Bill of Rights. Did you know about that? Knowing the full name of the March on Washington draws a clear connection between labor movements and civil rights. Follow me for a second. The federal minimum wage was set in 1928. I'll figure it out. I'll put it up here. It was 25 cents an hour. In 2025, the minimum wage is now $7.25 an hour. Now, you might say to yourself, the minimum wage has only gone up $7 an hour in 87 years, and that is definitely bad. But the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. So what about all the time the U.S. spent paying nothing for their labor? Hundreds of years of benefiting from the free labor force that was American slavery. When you think about it, minimum wage has only gone from nothing to $7.25 in 249 years. And that reality is much worse. Today, there's a ridiculous gap of wealth distribution, and we are all in what can only be described as a rat race for basic needs, while the rich only get richer. The lack of regulations on corporations, the crackdowns on unions, and the cruel working conditions of late-stage capitalism are in part punishments for demonstrations like the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Oh yeah, we got civil and workers' rights, and we've been paying for it ever since. The system needed to send a message that the people would absolutely not have too much power to negotiate the terms of their labor, because what? We are still a slave society. All right, last thing. Number 3, you need to know that Beyoncé released her first single, Crazy in Love, in May of 2003. Beyoncé facts are important for anyone to know, but this time it would really serve you well. Why? Because then you realize that Beyoncé's solo career is older than a little part of the government called U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Yeah. Beyoncé's solo career is older than ICE. And then you might not fall into despair and hopelessness when you are fighting a system you know in your heart is wrong. Now, most would say that ICE is a little bit older because it was established in March 2003, but the real Beehive members know that her first solo single is actually Work It Out from the Austin Powers movie, which came out in 2002. Even if we don't split hairs here though, you understand what I'm trying to say. My point is that this organization that is currently acting like a modern day version of a certain kind of secret police is only 22 years old. After 9/11, the United States government really started playing fast and loose with our individual rights. If you're not old enough to remember the utter chaos that was the post 9/11 era, please know that it was exactly that, chaos. I'm sure there are all kinds of videos out there about something called the Patriot Act. Yeah. I literally cannot overstate how many things you do in your life that were not a thing before the Patriot Act, that were not a thing before the government decided to sign away your individual right to privacy and tell you they were doing it because they was fighting terrorists. Speaking of things that weren't real, if you watch old episodes of crime dramas, the immigration episodes always mention the INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Service. That's what ICE used to be, and used to be is a reach. ICE is a new thing. The INS was dissolved in 2003. You might even say it was abolished. Most of its duties were absorbed into other government agencies, and ICE was created as the police arm of immigration enforcement. The INS was a thing that was created and then abolished, and something else was put in its place. If we're gonna fight these unjust systems, we need to stay grounded in a very basic reality. They haven't been around forever. It's so easy to get caught up in the belief that everything that exists has always existed and can never ever change. And while there are a few aspects of the US government that are pretty tough to penetrate, like the president only being able to serve 2 terms. Yeah, shout out to the Constitution. Y'all ate with that one part right there. There are parts that are absolutely not set in stone forever. And we know this because the same people telling you that there are some parts of the Constitution that can never change are actively trying to rip it apart in other areas. So let me see if I got this right. The Second Amendment means no one can ever put any kind of restrictions on firearms ever. But the Voting Rights Act put in place to protect the rights that were provided in the 14th and 15th Amendment, all that can be completely gutted because, you know, times change. I got that right? Okay, just make sure if I got that right. ICE isn't necessary. ICE isn't some 100-year-old government entity that is impossible to stop. Beyoncé dropped Crazy in Love the same year that ICE was created. Beyoncé got 35 Grammy Awards. Beyoncé has more Grammys than ICE has years in operation. Kendrick Lamar has 22 Grammys, the same number of Grammys that ICE has years in existence. When we keep the system in perspective like that, I bet a lot more people would believe that the system is a thing that can change because the INS changed, didn't it? All right, y'all, I've been telling y'all for months that I've been wanting to do long form content, and I have. I've talked about breaking through fear. I've read Trump's executive orders with y'all, and I've even gotten on here and not said anything. If you need some body doubling while you read, check out that playlist. I want to do more of those. But this is my first long form, and I really, really, really hope you liked it. All right, y'all. Like, share, comment, and subscribe so I can keep creating. And listen, because when you think about it like that, Beyonce has been doing that run, that Crazy in Love run. She's been doing it. She's been doing that longer than ICE has been snatching people off the street. She's been doing that longer than ICE has been a functioning government entity. What are we even doing? What are you even talking about? What do you mean?